I'm Nathan Lambert, and we have two very interesting presentations today. One has to do with content, a very academic use of content on a wiki today, and one that has to do with an innovative use of wiki technology potentially tomorrow. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ben Schechter. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Comprehensive Care in the Case School of Dental Medicine. He also serves as the Director of Patient Services for the clinic program within the School of Dental Medicine. And Dr. Schechter has done something that first caught my attention, a very interesting use of Wiki, in that he has created a manual for clinicians to use in their, I think, their third year of
third and fourth years, and eventually all 4 years.
And has proven to be a useful publishing model for this type of material. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Schechter.
Okay, thank you for coming. I still feel a little bit of a breeze, so that's pretty good. Case School of Dental Medicine is one of the many jewels in the Case Western Reserves community. And we're kind of on the corner of campus, tucked behind the railroad tracks. We are a community resource. We send our students out to, for example, to do sealants on at-risk school children, elementary school children, and this is just a quick shot of it. We also work within the university community to provide a student dental plan. This is a discount dental plan, essentially, for the student community. We also are a choice as one of the vendors or providers for an employee dental plan. And so employees who would like to get their care close to the university can have access to our resident programs. We're a very technology-centered program. Here, before we allow our students to torture humans, we actually have them doing the thing on mannequins. And this is one of about 10 stations that we have set up where the end of the drill is studded with LEDs. There's a stereoscopic camera that can actually do the math and tell exactly where the drill is. And so by using standardized teeth, we can train students before they even touch someone with a heartbeat in doing procedures. And they get instant feedback. As they are preparing a tooth, they can actually see it. They can turn this tooth in 3 dimensions and see how deep they are in different dimensions, see whether their first experience will result in a trip to the endodontist. This also has a virtual endodontic program, as a matter of fact. One of our residents in endodontics is doing a root canal using an operating microscope. Our undergraduate students have access to this equipment and those residents, and so that they can take their patients and actually do procedures using this equipment under direct supervision of our residents and faculty. This is something called the conical CT, and what this will do will be to, works kind of like a medical CT. It will produce in 3 dimensions images of people. Let me just get this thing going, and I'm going to speed it up because we don't want to spend a lot of time. This will actually produce motion pictures. This is our clinic. This was our clinic manual. Okay, we're a digital, high-tech community in what used to be an analog base. Now, this was a very good clinic manual. This had all of the stuff that you needed if you were a dental student and you needed to get some information about certain kinds of procedures, what our policies are, what our dress code is, all of those kinds of things. Includes even the old-fashioned plastic insets that have hard copy covers of our patient handbook. And so after you distribute a few hundred of these things to students and then decide to change it, what do you do? Inside the manual, there's all sorts of stuff that students could care less about, but that you sort of need to be able to track what's going on with the manual. For example, when the manual was up in the right-hand corner, when the manual was, when this page of the manual was printed, and what kinds of functions it impacts. Students don't want to know this. They don't need to know this. As the manual, compiling this manual is a huge job. Anybody that has had collaborative efforts on paper with faculty groups knows what it's like to send out a request, update your section, give it to the members, and then watch the stuff trickle back and chase them and things like that. That cannot be a unique experience to the School of Dental Medicine. And so as the clinic manual would go out of date, and before we could totally revise the thing, before we allowed students into the clinics in their third year, beginning of third year, which is going to begin in actually next month, this was the handout that we used. In addition, instead of the clinical manual, it was sort of the abridged version, had all of a lot of the same kinds of content in it, and it's 50 pages long. Now, I've been at the school for, I don't know, 6 years. I don't think I've ever seen a student take the clinic manual into the clinic. And who would? Every one of our students now in our new curriculum walks in the first day of class with a notebook computer with 75 or 80 textbooks on it. Now, granted, textbooks are old-fashioned, but they're there, they're searchable, you can write Post-it notes on them, you can highlight in them, and everything is searchable, including the Post-it notes and the highlights. And, you know, so what are we doing with something like this? This is the denture equivalent of what our clinic manual used to be. Okay? These, I think, may have been one of Washington's sets or something like that. I don't know if there are any historians in here. Anyway, we looked at what we needed to bring this thing into the 20th century, if not the 21st century. The first thing is we're kind of cheap, so we couldn't spend a lot of money. We spend a huge amount of resources in a lot of technology, and this would compete for that. We needed to have a place where, there's one place where it gets updated. And we wanted it searchable. We wanted to put more content in it. We wanted to put, it needed to be simple to use. We wanted to put in better resolution. Instead of, you know, how manuals get copied, they get copied, and then a copy of that copy goes in the next year, and a copy of that copy goes in the following year. By the time you get to use it, you can barely read it. We didn't want this thing to be rocket science. And I didn't think it really was, but having attended this conference, there's a really large volume of really interesting stuff that I see that we can use in this technology. We needed it to be secure because unlike Wikipedia, we wanted to control who actually had the content. We didn't want a vote of worldwide students telling us how, for example, to prepare a tooth for a composite filling. That's one of those plastic things that looks like the tooth. My first thought, of course, being over 30 slightly, was to publish this thing on a CD, you know, probably in Word, because I think you can do some searching in Word, but you have all of the same problems. Do you hand out a new CD every month? And things get costly. The cost of distributing that loose leaf binder, just making those things, had to be $35 a piece. Our IT, we've got some very talented IT people at CASE, and they recommended Wikipedia. I knew about Wikipedia from the internet. I hadn't used it very much at the time, but you know, this is their recommendation, and again, I'm slightly over 30. And so instead of a table of contents that looks like what you see on the left, this will take a couple of seconds. we can have a table of contents that looks like this, with a tremendous amount of interaction. And I can't get the, okay, there we go. Instead of a patient brochure that we would have to chase down our students and say, replace this. Supposed to hit one time or twice? Okay. This is the table of contents to our brochure. And so if you want to look at the welcome part of the brochure, I thought we installed this already. Okay. It'll come. There we go. We can bring this into, I don't know if you can see it. You don't really need to read it. But this is something that we can update in one central location. No more of those, again, forever. And instead of directions that are fourth and fifth generation xerographic copies, we can publish those directions on our okay, we don't want to do that. On our wiki-based clinic manual, the stuff that students never want to see, we can have quick links to right here so that we don't lose them. We don't lose that information. Plus, we can always, there are clinic forms and all sorts of other kinds of information that we use that a student can see immediately. This happens to be the progress notes where students will write in what they did on that particular day to that patient. And so students can actually see online the latest copy of all of the forms and the kinds of things that make our clinic operate. We are, by the way, migrating to a digital clinic record. We got a little bit stalled with that because of some software problems, but eventually paper records are going to go away. Clinic manual won't. Students are still going to need some interesting things. One of the things that you can do on a clinic wiki manual is put in slide presentations. Okay. From our faculty. This is how to do a crown. Okay, once you've seen this, if anybody wants to try it, we have a great place to do that. And I'm sure that our dean would be very happy to see you messing around with our equipment. Unfortunately, there's a film I said film. I'm also, again, over 30. There's a digital record of the things I'm saying, so I guess I better watch it. We can have things that are instantly available for students. For example, in the clinic, we have different commercial laboratories that we use for different things. Students can, from their chair side in the clinic, can find out how long it takes to get a denture back from a lab. That's kind of important when patients want to know this. Of course, everything takes longer in a school. We don't want people going off and doing all sorts of things and then saying, here's what it looks like. We'd kind of like to check it on various critical steps. The next steps that we have for the clinic manual, the clinic manual is currently published in a way that you would publish a printed manual. The first thing, of course, that you see is a table of contents. We know that Wiki is capable of all sorts of graphic enhancements, things that will make this much more interesting, which is going to be one of our next steps. The first step that we had was to get a lot of content in and then parse that content out down because we had, how am I doing? Okay, because we had multiple sources, we had to get people to collaborate and agree. We wanted to get rid of the phantom links. Wiki's an open source software, and I don't know if anybody else has had this problem in using it, but we've put stuff in there that disappeared. And most likely because it's extremely sensitive to any, for example, if a case or for an extra space. Also, if you put something, if you have, for example, in the table of contents, if you have stuff that's linked to that table and you change something, one character in that table of contents, everything behind it disappears. So you really have to copy the stuff that you had behind it and then make the change and then paste it into the new link. So it took a little bit of time getting used to that. Actually, that was mainly time by my student helper, Angela, who did a lot of this, the entry. And eventually this thing, even though I started working on it, will be a collaborative effort. This manual will be turned over to the Clinical Affairs Committee that has membership from all over the from the School of Dental Medicine, and the decisions to enter content, to delete things, will be the decisions of that committee. This is my desk, very cleaned up. And as I said, I'm extremely dangerous. There's a path worn from our IT department to my office. And you can actually see the grooves and the footprints to rescue me every time I screw something up and the lights go out in the university. Going in the future, we would like, especially after seeing what the presentations of today, there is absolutely no reason why this could not be a collaborative effort, not just of our Clinical Affairs Committee, but the Clinical Affairs Committees of other dental schools. I was at a meeting on evidence-based dentistry. These are the meta-studies that are done to decide if the stuff that we do actually works. And in medicine, in dentistry, any of the healing arts, a lot of the things that we have are based on clinical experience and not actual evidence. That body is going to slowly build. Anyway, one of the participants is going to Africa to an area that was devastated by war and famine. And his question to me was, can I get him copies of textbooks and of printed material that he could take to Africa to use to help teach the people that he was working with very basic kinds of things. This screams for that kind of a content usage. And so this is just the very beginning step in using this kind of a format for intellectual capital.
I would ask if you can hold off on your questions until after our second presentation. I'd like to turn now and introduce Dr. Gasparini to my immediate right. He's a professor of civil engineering at CWRU. Dr. Gasparini's research focuses on stochastic dynamics of structures in strong winds and earthquakes, which I admit I had to look up what stochastic meant to actually understand Dr. Gasparini's research. He's also an advocate for the preservation of culturally important components of our built infrastructure, such as bridges, which he will now tell us about. And his colleague, Bill Barrow, is a special collections librarian at Cleveland State University.
He'll advance the slide.
Bill is notable for leading the Cleveland Memory Project, which is an electronic showcase of digital collections at Cleveland State University. And this has served as an excellent model for archiving and presenting digital collections on the web. And I now turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'm a civil engineer, and we deal with our built infrastructure. So I'd like to really present two needs related to our built infrastructure. One is very curious. It's related to older bridge infrastructure, and one is related to emerging infrastructure. So the first need is related to bridge infrastructure in particularly. And that is the following, okay? We really need to have to maintain and rehabilitate important components of our bridge patrimony. We need to disseminate and advance knowledge on material degradation processes, structural assessment technologies, and rehabilitation technologies. and we need to improve decision-making process on rehabilitation, and we need to improve rehabilitation designs. It turns out that engineers are not taught to rehabilitate things. There are probably no engineering programs in the United States that deal with rehabilitation of structures. And so they have to either learn ad hoc on the job, or and there are also no academic resources for really teaching these kinds of engineering work to undergraduate students or graduate students. So there are really no standard academic resources to carry out these needs. Again, and the view is the following, okay, that it's no less important to rehabilitate a bridge than it is to rehabilitate a historic building. So we have that kind of a view, and there's a body of engineers that are concerned about the destruction of our built infrastructure. Not only our built buildings, but also our built bridges, our built sewage treatment plants, our built environment, period. So we view the rehabilitation of civil engineering works in the same vein as we view the rehabilitation of buildings per se. Again, because of the lack of standard academic resources to teach some of these things, we think that the web-based solution is really the solution to really help meet these needs. So what are the principles? So the overall objective then is to really build and maintain a reliable state-of-the-art information resource on bridge rehabilitation with a focus on decision-making and on the engineering design of rehabilitation projects. So that's our objective. That's what we're shooting toward. And we have set out some principles, which are the following, okay? The important thing is that it be accurate. We don't want engineers, so this is strictly a professional site in a sense, that an engineer or a historian would access this site and really read and learn accurate information that can be used for design. So not only general information, but absolutely accurate information for design. So that's one of our main objectives. Useful and timely information. We want it to be inclusive. The rehabilitation community or the preservation community in infrastructure really includes historians. It includes other persons involved. For example, the State Historic Preservation Office is involved in rehabilitation of bridges in the United States. So we want it to be inclusive. We want it to have information not only for engineers, but we want it to have information for historians and preservationists, for them to also be part of this process. Obviously, we want it to be flexible. We want it to be evolving and adaptable. So, and we want it to be meaning that it can be a forum for contributions. So we definitely are looking for contributions to this. There's no way one individual or a few individuals can come up with the body of knowledge necessary for rehabilitation. So we want it to be a forum for contributions, and we want it to be a forum for news, inquiries, and discussions. So those are some principles. The other potential application that I want to briefly describe has the opposite problem. This is an emerging technology which has not yet been established, and for that reason the design standards are evolving. There's really no database on performance, and there's really no agreement regarding how these systems should be designed. For example, the Cuyahoga County is now considering a wind farm in Lake Erie. What are the standards that we should use for design? What are the reliability standards that we should apply for that wind farm on Lake Erie? What are the environmental concerns on that wind farm? So this is a second problem that we have then. This is an emergent technology with no accepted standards and no really good database on performance and reliability, and all the knowledge is proprietary. Say GE does not want to release their knowledge on the performance of their systems. Siemens does not want to release their knowledge on performance of systems, and other suppliers. So there's really a need for an objective database, an objective set of information on performance and failures of these systems. If you go on YouTube and look and Google, go and look up movies on failures of turbines, you'll see some amazingly entertaining as well as instructive failure modes that have been shown. So we want to design a database of performance and failures of wind power systems. We want to have a data on design approaches and reliability, and data on environmental issues and designs. And hopefully this will serve the nation in terms of designing wind farms throughout the United States. I am not an expert on these technologies. My colleague Bill Barrow has been working with me in trying to define the optimum way in order to disseminate these technologies to both engineers and preservationists and historians. Bill?
Well, Dario came to us some time ago talking about a conference where a group of engineers and preservation historians and everybody had gotten together and discussed all of these goals that they had, and the need for an authoritative resource in the rehabilitation of historic bridges that could be used by practicing engineers and preservation historians. And he also had what was attractive to me, and that is a large group of people already communicating on this subject. They jokingly called themselves the Pontists, the French for bridge, is it not? And so I see that as a collaboration already happening, and just needs means of expressing it. I look upon the opportunities for collaboration with great gusto, and things like the technology and that are just details that we enhance. But if we don't have the people willing to work together and having the relationships of trust, then collaborations are going to fall apart if we just hope that Facebook is going to solve the problem or something. Okay, please. They came to us partially because we have the Wilbur J and Sarah Ruth Watson Bridge Book Collection, an endowment fund at Cleveland State. Wilbur Watson was a prominent bridge engineer in Cleveland before World War II. He designed the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge, the Akron Air Dock, some buildings here on campus. And he was just a prominent person working on early concrete work in the United States in the first part of the century. Dario could tell you more about him than I can. His daughter, who worked for Cleveland State, donated his collection of books in an endowment fund to us, and we've been trying to think of just how can we use that endowment fund to do something other than merely buy books. How else, especially in this new digital online world, how can we disseminate information in the new digital library form? So we put together an advisory committee of local engineers and historians called the Watson Publication Committee, and just kicked around some ideas, and then one of them was to support this work by Dario and his colleagues. Please. You know, libraries, especially academic libraries, are always looking for ways to support the work of faculty and to engage the wider community. If you haven't heard, Cleveland State's logo now is Engage Learning. So, you know, we're engaging. I hope we're engaging, maybe that's the word. But so this could be a collaboration between Case and Cleveland State that was a positive opportunity that would benefit not only Case, but, you know, Cleveland's got an engineering, Cleveland State has an engineering school too. And Dario is a very collaborative person by nature, so we were happy to work with him. Thank you. So we're trying to design a site that would be aimed at an audience of practicing engineers, private and governmental organizations, and not particularly targeted on academicians. We weren't trying to have refereed articles and so forth, but rather something that would be a practical utility to somebody in the field trying to design a project. The goal was to encourage professional participation in this process. It wasn't just going to be a top-down one or two people writing the holy writ and passing it out to everybody else. But we needed an expert editorial committee that would ensure the accuracy of the contents. The users there would come and find accurate, detailed information on the best materials, processes, and standards to use in rehabilitation. They could report on new projects, what they were doing out in the field, what problems they had, how they solved them, and so forth. And there could be reviews and discussions. Okay. We decided that this sounded like it needed a wiki. So the Wikipedia course we knew about. We decided the Wikipedia itself was too anonymous for our purposes. We couldn't have a lot of people who we didn't know who they were, you know, funny guy 23 coming along and telling us, you know, something about the technology of bridges. And so the accuracy and everything would be too difficult to control. And it would destroy the accountability that a professional engineer would need to be able to rely on what it says. So we discounted the Wikipedia for that purpose. Now, the Wikipedia co-founder, Larry Sanger, had also created something called the Citizenidium. He branched the Wikipedia. He took the whole Wikipedia, made a copy of it, and then brought in an expert group of PhDs who would oversee how things happened. And the editorial committee would vet the submissions, and they had constables that would go around and shake up people who weren't behaving. And they would know who they were because everybody had to use their real name. It couldn't just be anonymous, somebody or not. If they were going to contribute, we had to know who they were. They had to know who they were. And there was also some provision for signed articles, so they weren't just a generic encyclopedia article with nobody's name attached to it. There could be, in some places, signed accountable articles. Well, although it was promising at first, the Citizenidium soon proved insufficient for our needs. I met with Larry Sanger last week and kind of laid this all out to him. He said, yeah, I kind of knew when you described what you were doing that this probably wasn't going to work. I get a lot of these kinds of requests from academic or expert groups, and I can't really accommodate them. He said the editorial committee cannot be limited to the experts known to Dario, so there'd be other PhDs in engineering or maybe some other related field too might come in and help vet this, and be a little uncertain just what their qualifications were. The names that were used might not be the real ones. There's no real effective process to go and vet everybody. You don't have DNA samples or something to make sure that this person is who they say they are. And eventually the entries that this group created would be open to being added to or manipulated by others outside of Dario's group. So we decided that wasn't going to work. But the main problem was that even if the work done by identified people was too fragmentary in nature to be closely controlled and accountable for what was being written, exactly who in this big compositely written article had said that a half-inch gusset plate was good enough for a particular kind of bridge would be hard to track down. There'd be ways you could get in and see who made what up, but you can't really rely on that. You can't deconstruct an article that's evolving over time in a myriad of little ways and try and find out what the accountability and responsibility was for the facts that were being put in it. So we decided that that wasn't going to really work. Yes. So we decided that maybe we'd look into something else. Ohiolink, which is the Federation of University Libraries in Ohio, has created a new service called the Digital Resource Commons, or the DRC. It uses an MIT DSpace database to manage a wide variety of resources. This is the kind of database in a smaller scale we use on the Cleveland Memory Project, where you can go in, search for something, and get a whole list of things that come back. Only in this case, we'd be linking for text, photographs, audio, video, maps, drawings, diagrams, DSpace shapefile, GIS shapefiles, whatever Dario and his group felt were germane to his topic. They could all be managed by this database. The input would be controlled by library liaisons and/or the faculty client, Dario's committee. It's huge capacity, powerful servers, many features, blah, blah, blah. It had all the capacity to do a lot of the kind of information processing we need. And then we could front it with pages that didn't have to be as active. Who are we? How do you contact us? Discussion pages, bibliography, maybe even use a wiki for some of this, And so since Cleveland State and the KSU Kelvin Smith Library here are both participants in the DRC, we could collaborate together on this project very easily and create a separate space that wasn't Case, wasn't Cleveland State, wasn't any local, provincial sort of looking thing, but it's kind of a national, neutral sort of site where this kind of work could be done. And we could call it something like, WatsonBridge Rehab.com. Now, I didn't know that who our co-presenter was going to be today, but when I first went out trying to see about using bridgerehab.org, .net, .com, the first two were fine, but bridgerehab.com was being used by a group of dentists, so we couldn't. So we had to modify it, and that's where the WatsonBridge Rehab came in.
That's where we get all of our technology.
So anyway, if we get any funny requests, we'll pass them on to you, and I hope you, okay. Okay, thank you. So in summation, the Citizenidium is useful where multiple constantly changing authorship in an expertly controlled environment is satisfactory and preferred to the Wikipedia is kind of Wild West approach. But the Citizenidium is still not accountable enough for the professional engineers apt to incur legal liabilities in their work. And the DRC's database offers more accountability and expert oversight while providing good tools and the means for library faculty collaborations. So we are very much early in this. We didn't really have, and Nathan didn't even know this, that we kind of moved a little away from the wiki model. But I think it's instructive to know where wikis don't work as well as where they do, or where they might have to be mixed with some other type of technology to come up with an adequate site. So I think the Citizenidium has a lot of use. They have an offspring called the, oh boy, Eduzenium. It's edu, like the edu suffix on a website. Zendium, and it's basically for academics, but for students to do papers and practice doing things. There's a couple other flavors of wikis out there, plus just wikis in general. So anyway, that's our particular thing, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to, before we take any questions, just turn it over to Roger Zender and our colleague Bill Claspy, who are both librarians here at Case Western, and they'll point out some of the interesting uses of wiki technology within libraries. Specifically, Bill can talk about a curriculum of, so the question might be, how do we use this? You know, how does somebody in research, how do professors use technologies like this? And our libraries are certainly taking a stab at helping.
What we've done at the library is we had a set of course-related and subject-related information guides for students and faculty to use. And we decided to sort of migrate the content that we had that was living on web pages, HTML, and move it into the wiki sphere. Partially to make it interactive, but also simply to make it simpler for librarians to add content, to create these things in more interesting ways and do it more simply. So the wiki format that we use at the library helped with that. So we wanted to kind of point out that that's also a possibility. Perhaps less of the collaboratory model that I think the dental school is looking for, but more as an authoring tool. So we thought we would at least throw that out as well as a possible method of using the wiki format, and as perhaps a spark of discussion for this group to ask questions about or comment on maybe the way that you all are using wikis in your professional or academic careers. Roger, I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, and just to tap that, I mean, even as cool and collaborative as technology like Wiki can be, there's also other reasons to use a wiki, in that, you know, when we looked at redesigning our website, we installed a new content management system, and, you know, we're paying the licenses for people to be able to go and edit the website. You know, the people who were going to be actually editing and collaborating on the subject guides and the course guides that we're going to be publishing, you know, to put that on the website, that would have been an additional $1,000 per person just to be able to have them go in and edit stuff only just for those areas. So it was even, you know, it was even kind of weighing just a cost factor of just what it is for licensing to kind of use that technology. But then, you know, also we determined that we wanted these to have a way to be able to provide feedback for them. So as we're building these subject guides, to give people the ability to then comment and like provide a discussion to go on top of what we decided was, you know, a guide for a particular subject. So there's definitely many facets to look at and why to use them. Not only just collaborative, but maybe even from cost and those types of things as well.
No, I have a question maybe to get us started. Dr. Schechter, have you considered or have any interest in measuring the students reviewing your manual as well as the individual articles, whereas before you distribute a manual and have no notion of who has reviewed your actual practices outside of testing, but you know, with technology such as this, you could conceivably actively track who is reading these.
Or if anybody wants.
Or if anyone.
That's a really good point. And yes, absolutely. This doesn't mean that you can't have sidebars, sidebar wikis that are internet-based. This, at least initially, is on a closed system that can't be accessed necessarily from the outside. At least it's editorially. But absolutely, we would like to see what students understand. We'd like them to be able to communicate that to us. And these kids are smart. And they're being trained to critically think. Now, most of us learned in an atmosphere of we sit, you talk, we listen, we spit it back out on a test. We're changing our curriculum, and we're giving or hoping to have students critically assess information that's given to them, including the information that we give them. And so we've got in our new curriculum, the first students under our new curriculum are coming into the clinic this summer. And we fully expect them, when a faculty member says you do it like this, someone's going to say why. And then maybe they should go down and look at some of the references and some of the evidence for this stuff and say, well, the evidence shows that this works. And those are the kinds of interactions that I'd like to see. And without knowing what kind of access, you have no idea.
Question for both groups. How do your students and your colleagues deal with changes in the system? If you have a citation in your wiki and students go in and review it, and then tomorrow it changes, and they come back to you, take a test and said, I learned it this way, now all of a sudden it's this way. Or in your case, the gusset plate needs to be 1/2 inch. Next week it's 3/4 inch, and I just built a bridge with a 1/2 inch gusset plate.
Which one was it? Now I've avoided it.
So what happens? And how do you anticipate dealing with those kind of problems?
We hope that our bridges don't fall down either. The changes that, if there's a sea change in thinking, that's something that's going to rumble through the university like a tidal wave. Most things are very subtle, and most of those are in the biological sciences component, where you might not see the effects of those changes for a long time. But the short answer is we could go back and see when it changed, because Wiki tracks that, tracks who did it, who made the change, and when it was made. And if a student said, I got this wrong on an exam because at that time, this is what the prevailing evidence showed. Evidence changes every day. And so you have to do the same thing with evidence. We were told to include the resources that you used to base that the evidence on a particular treatment, along with the progress notes, because it could change. And a year later, there might be some new thinking. And then somebody would say, well, you did it wrong. And we could say, well, no, the evidence at the time we did it indicated that this was the right way. And so, sure, it's all about documentation, and Wiki really helps with that.
I think our focus should be on principles and on performance data. I don't think we should have prescriptive solutions per se. And so engineers model and analyze. That's a sequence that they go through in order to define a design. So there will be very few, hopefully, prescriptive type of rules, and mostly on general principles and performance data. So we would minimize something like, we would never say a statement like a 1/2 inch gusset plate is sufficient. So we wouldn't say such prescriptions.
That's one of the dangers, because the 1/2 inch gusset plate was my example, and I'm not an engineer, so we've already seen the danger of letting people like me write anything for the. But yes, but it is all about documentation, and I think without
principles and
details and something like the Citizenidium with a lot of people, just simplifies the process of being able to track the accountability of changes.
Especially for librarians, what software did you choose?
We use Wiki.
Document.
And I can attest that it's very simple to use.
How does it differ from the standard Wiki?
There's really no difference. Something like Wikipedia is run off of a database, where .wiki is kind of a flat file system. But essentially, as far as the markup's a little bit different, but all the same functions are about the same. One of the things that is important to look at when picking a wiki is kind of looking at the user base that comes along with it. Something like MediaWiki that runs Wikipedia is huge, and so you have a lot of people talking, a lot of people fixing problems, a lot of people adding functionality, and that was something that also came along with Dr. Wiki. Not quite the level of MediaWiki, but it still has a user base, it still has upgrades, it still has plugins that really allow you to kind of do some new things with it. You know, for us, we had used just internally on the tech team for the library, we were using Wiki as an internal communication tool. And then when we went through the website redesign, kind of looked at how we were putting almost everything on the web, even though it didn't really necessarily need to be there through this process of the redesign. We kind of looked at what we were using as the tech team and saw there was so much value to the rest of the, to the rest of the library, and the rest of the library staff, and also to the university community, just using the tool we had already had and we were already familiar with. So it was nice because there was really no kind of learning curve. Most of the librarians and the staff have actually had some kind of connection with it. So, you know, it was really kind of a simple and scalable solution for us to use Wiki.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. Isn't Kelvin Smith Library looking to integrate a Web 2.0 training program into the Case Learns program offering for any of the?
That's right. That's something that's going to be happening this fall. And I don't believe that there's any information about it on the Case Learns site yet, but that's something to keep track of because that will be open, so it'll be sort of training on all sorts of Web 2.0 technologies that will be available in a Web 2.0 sort of format. So that's something that will be happening.
Hopefully to make sense of these technologies in this alphabet soup of, DocuWiki versus MediaWiki or any other of these Web 2.0 technologies, and potentially how you'd use them in your departments and or on campus or elsewhere.
I'm curious, based on the analysis that you did in the course of the platform, what recommendations you might have for simpler situations such as high school or even junior high school educators who are looking to use the interactivity of wikis either as a curriculum model or to encourage interaction with students. So I'm asking both about platform and any learnings perhaps in the more complex environments that you looked at that might be translatable to the high school or junior high school level.
Well, I think one of the first things you want to look at is your technology environment. If this is something you want to host yourself and kind of run yourself, or if it's something you just want to sign up online and have it hosted for you. A good online wiki is one called PBWiki. So you don't have any of the overhead of having a server and installing the software and managing and doing updates. It's just a purely online thing that is nice. I think that education probably has some specific needs, especially K-12 education, that you might need to consider. The security of the students and posting and not giving public access to it. So I'd encourage probably doing a little bit of research because I know that there are definitely a lot of educators out there that are using wikis. But just kind of seeing what their standards were for using the wiki from a legal perspective or an education perspective, and see what they're doing. But that's the first decision would be, online, offline, kind of what you want to do with it. I think you have probably a little less control when it's online versus when you're installing and running it yourself. But those are the kinds of things that you need to weigh of that decision. But that would be your first one.
I would recommend finding a 12-year-old. Just ask them how to do it. They'll do it for you. They work cheap. And you're done.
Excellent advice. No other questions. Thank you very much for coming.